As the contract nears its end, the bride must decide, stay with the millionaire or walk away. The envelope arrived quietly. No warning, no urgency stamped on the paper. Just a simple reminder slipped beneath the door, resting there as if it had always been waiting. Clara stopped mid-step when she saw it. She did not pick it up right away. The apartment was still. Morning light moved slowly across the floor. Somewhere outside, traffic hummed like a distant thought. The contract was nearing its end, not as a threat, not as a demand, but as a question. And for the first time, Clara realized something unsettled her more than fear ever had. When nothing was forcing her to stay, she would have to decide. What was she going to do when no one was holding her in place? Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Clara finally bent down and picked up the envelope. The paper felt lighter than she expected. She carried it to the table and sat down, resting her hands on either side of it without opening it. The contract had once felt like a wall, something she leaned against for survival. Now it felt like a door. Across the room, Ethan stood near the window, reading something on his phone. He noticed the envelope immediately, but he did not comment. He waited. Clara took a breath. Slow, steady. The reminder came, she said. Ethan nodded once. I assumed it would. There was no tension in his voice, no attempt to soften the moment or rush past it. It ends soon, she said. Yes. The word carried weight but no pressure. Clara looked at him. You have not asked me anything. I know, Ethan replied. That is intentional. She studied his face, searching for expectation. She found none. What happens when it ends? She asked. That depends on you, he said. Nothing else. The simplicity of the answer startled her. She had prepared herself for persuasion, for reassurance layered, with need, for subtle reminders of comfort and safety. None came. Instead, Ethan stepped back from the table, giving her space without making a point of it. You do not owe me a decision today, he continued. Or tomorrow. Clara nodded, though her chest felt tight. That was the problem. There was no urgency to push against, no fear to escape, just choice. As the morning unfolded, Clara moved through familiar routines with new awareness. Every sound felt sharper. Every quiet moment stretched longer. The contract had once protected her from chaos. Now its ending demanded something harder. Honesty, not with Ethan, with herself. And as she folded the envelope carefully and placed it back on the table, one question followed her like a shadow. When the time came, would she stay because she wanted to, or would she walk away simply because she could? The answer was no longer hidden. It was waiting. The days that followed did not change on the surface. Mornings arrived the same way. Coffee brewed. Light filtered through the windows at familiar angles. The city outside continued its steady rhythm. But Clara felt the difference immediately. Time no longer stretched endlessly forward. It curved inward, drawing her attention to small details she had once ignored. She noticed how often Ethan paused before speaking, as if giving space room to exist. How he adjusted his schedule without mentioning it, creating quiet pockets where she could be alone without explanation. None of it felt performative. That was what unsettled her most. She had lived inside pressure before. She understood manipulation disguised as care. She knew the weight of expectation even when it was wrapped in kindness. This was different. This was absence. At breakfast one morning, Clara sat across from Ethan, stirring her tea slowly. You are being careful, she said. Ethan looked up, not defensive. Curious. Am I? Yes, she replied. More than before. He considered that. Because the decision is approaching. And because I do not want my presence to interfere with it. The words were simple. Their implication was not. Clara looked down at her cup. It already does, she said quietly. Ethan did not deny it. I know. That acknowledgement settled something in her chest. Later that afternoon, Clara left the apartment alone. Not to escape, to observe herself in the world without the safety net she had grown used to. She walked several blocks, past places she had once avoided. A small cafe, a bookstore, corners where memories used to surface uninvited. She did not flinch. Healing had done its work more quietly than she realized. Inside the bookstore, she found herself lingering in the aisle marked personal essays. She pulled one book from the shelf, then another. Stories about choice, about leaving, about staying. She did not buy anything. She did not need answers from strangers. What she needed was clarity. When she returned, Ethan was not there. A note rested on the counter. Gone for a meeting. No ruse. Dinner later if you want. No expectations. No assumption of togetherness. She sat with the note for a moment before folding it and placing it aside. That evening, when Ethan returned, he noticed the shift immediately. "You went out," he said. "Yes." "How did it feel?" She considered. Grounded. He nodded, satisfied. They ate dinner quietly, not out of avoidance, but because words felt unnecessary. At one point, Ethan spoke again. "I want you to know something." Clara looked up. "I have arranged everything so that when the contract ends, there are no loose threads," he said. "Housing, logistics, privacy. You will not have to negotiate anything." Her four paused midair. "You plan my exit," she said. "Yes." "Not to push you away." He did not say. Not to prepare for loss. He let the silence speak instead. Clara felt something tighten and release at the same time. "That makes leaving easier," she said. "That is the point," Ethan replied. She studied him. "And staying?" "That would be harder," he admitted, "because it would mean you chose it without obstacles." The honesty landed deeply. That night, Clara lay awake longer than usual. Not from anxiety, but from awareness. For the first time, staying felt like the risk. Leaving would be clean, clear, safe. Staying would require vulnerability without necessity, choice without urgency. She turned on her side, staring at the faint outline of the door. Healing had brought her to this moment. But healing did not tell her what to do next. It only made the question impossible to avoid. And as the contract's end drew closer, Clara realized the quiet tension was not between her and Ethan. It was between who she had been and who she was becoming. Ethan made his position clear without announcing it. The next morning, Clara found a thin folder placed neatly on the table beside the envelope she had not opened again. It was not labeled. It did not demand attention. She opened it anyway. Inside were details arranged with careful neutrality. Housing options, travel flexibility, a timeline that ended cleanly at the contract conclusion. Everything structured so her departure would be simple, private, and free of complication. No pressure, no strings, just preparation. When Ethan entered the room, Clara was still reading. "You planned this," she said, not accusing. Observing. "Yes," he replied. "For how long?" "Since the beginning." That answer surprised her more than the folder itself. "You knew I might leave," she said. "I assumed you should be able to," Ethan answered. "From a first day." She closed the folder slowly. "And you never told me." "There was no reason to," he said. "It was not meant to influence you." Clara studied his face, searching for defensiveness. She found none. "What happens if I leave?" she asked. Ethan did not answer immediately. He took a moment, as if choosing precision over comfort. "Then I will respect your decision," he said, "and I will be grateful for the time you stayed." The words landed quietly, not dramatically, but with weight. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her, not because of loss, but because of integrity. Most people prepared exits to protect themselves. Ethan had prepared hers to protect her. That afternoon, Clara watched him move through the apartment with deliberate restraint. He did not hover. He did not withdraw. He simply adjusted. At one point, he paused near the doorway to her room. "I have a dinner tonight," he said. "I will be late." She nodded. "Okay." No assumption that she would wait. No invitation disguised as courtesy. When the door closed behind him, Clara sat alone in the quiet. She realized something then. Ethan had removed every external obstacle to leaving. What remained was her internal hesitation, and that frightened her more than any pressure ever had. Later, she stepped outside again, this time with intention. She walked without direction, letting the city pull her forward. She passed couples arguing softly, people moving too fast, others standing still, afraid to choose either motion or rest. She wondered which version she had been. At a crosswalk, she stopped, watching the light change. Leaving would mean safety without intimacy. Staying would mean intimacy without guarantee. For the first time, the risk belonged to staying. That night, Ethan returned quietly. Clara was still awake, sitting on the couch. "I saw the folder," she said. "I assumed you would. You made leaving very easy," she said. "Yes. And staying?" He sat across from her. "Staying would require you to want it." She held his gaze. "And if I do not, then you will still be whole," he replied. "And I will accept that." The absence of persuasion was disarming. "You are not trying to convince me," she said. "No, Ethan replied, because then it would not be your choice." The words settled between them, heavy and calm. Clara leaned back, closing her eyes briefly. She had spent so much of her life reacting to force that freedom felt unfamiliar. Healing had stripped away fear. Now it asked for courage. When she opened her eyes, Ethan was still there, present, unmoving, not waiting for an answer, just allowing the space for one to exist. And in that space, Clara understood something fundamental. The decision ahead was not about whether she could leave. It was about whether she was ready to choose connection without necessity. The contract's end was approaching, but the real question had already arrived, and it had nothing to do with time. Clara slept lightly that night, not from fear, but from thought. Memories surfaced without warning, not sharp, not overwhelming, just present enough to demand attention. She remembered rooms where staying had meant shrinking, conversations where silence had been mistaken for agreement, hands that held too tightly, calling it care. In those memories, leaving had been survival. Now, survival was no longer the question. She rose early and sat by the window, watching the city wake. She noticed how calm her body felt, how steady her breath remained even as her thoughts wandered. That steadiness was new. Healing had not erased her past. It had given her enough ground to stand on while remembering it. Later that morning, she met Ethan in the kitchen. They moved around each other with quiet familiarity, neither interrupting the other's space. "You were awake early," he said. "Yes. Did you sleep?" "Enough." He nodded, accepting the answer without probing. They sat across from each other, the table between them clear. No folders, no envelopes, no reminders. "I've been thinking about staying," Clara said suddenly. Ethan did not react. He waited. "In the past," she continued, "staying always came with a cost. I paid with silence, with compliance." She looked down briefly, then back up. "I do not know how to stay without disappearing." The honesty in her voice was raw, but controlled. Ethan leaned back slightly, careful not to crowd the moment. "You do not have to know yet. But if I stay," she said, "I want it to be because I choose you, not because I am afraid to be alone." "That is the only reason I would accept," Ethan replied. The clarity of his answer settled something inside her. It did not speak for a moment. Clara realized then that the conflict was not between leaving and staying. It was between familiarity and growth. Leaving was familiar. Staying, under these conditions, was unknown. That afternoon, Clara went out again. This time, she visited a park she had not returned to in years, a place tied to an old version of herself. She sat on a bench and watched children run past, parents calling softly. Life unfolded without urgency. She noticed how her body remained present. She was not bracing for harm. She was not scanning for exits. That realization surprised her. She had learned how to leave, but she was still learning how to remain. When she returned, Ethan was not home. A note waited for her, simple and unassuming. "Meeting ran late. Dinner is in the fridge if you want it." She smiled faintly. No expectation, no disappointment implied. That evening, Clara stood in her room, looking at the packed suitcase she had never fully unpacked. It had followed her from place to place, always ready. She opened it. Inside were items she no longer needed for defense. Clothes chosen for blending in. Shoes worn for walking away quickly. She did not unpack them. She did not zip it shut either. Instead, she sat beside it considering. Staying would mean unpacking more than a suitcase. It would mean unpacking habits, fears, old reflexes. Later, Ethan returned quietly. Clara was in the living room, reading. "You are still awake," he said. "Yes." They sat together, the space between them comfortable. "I am afraid," Clara admitted after a moment. "Not of leaving, of choosing to stay and finding myself unprepared." Ethan listened. "Fear does not mean you are wrong," he said. "It means the choice matters." She nodded slowly. For the first time, she understood that healing was not about certainty. It was about capacity. The capacity to choose without running, without freezing, without losing oneself. As the night settled, Clara felt the weight of the decision ahead more clearly than ever. Not as pressure, but as possibility. The contract's end was approaching, and with it, a version of herself she was only just beginning to trust. The days that followed moved slowly, as if time itself had softened around them. Clara noticed it first in the mornings. The absence of urgency. The way her shoulders did not tense when she heard footsteps behind her. The way silence no longer felt like something she had to fill or endure. She realized that healing had entered quietly, not as a revelation, but as permission. Permission to exist without explanation. Ethan, for his part, did nothing extraordinary, and that was precisely what mattered. He did not check where she went. He did not ask how long she would be gone. When she returned, he greeted her the same way he always had. Calm, present, unchanged. One afternoon, they crossed paths in the hallway. It was a small moment, unremarkable on the surface. But Clara paused. In the past, she said, people changed once they felt secure. Ethan stopped walking. They relaxed, she continued. Their kindness became conditional. Their patience expired. He met her gaze. "I'm not patient with you because I am waiting for something." She studied his face, searching for hidden meaning. "And if I choose to leave?" she asked. "Then I will know that what we had was real," he answered, because it was not held in place by obligation. The simplicity of his response unsettled her more than any dramatic promise could have. That evening, Clara found herself opening drawers she had avoided. Old notebooks, letters she had never sent. Proof of a woman who had once survived by leaving pieces of herself behind. She read them slowly. There was anger in those pages. Fear, desperation, but also resilience. She understood then that healing did not erase who she had been. It integrated her. Later, she joined Ethan in the living room. The city lights glowed beyond the windows, steady and distant. "I'm afraid of choosing wrong," Clara said. "There is no wrong choice," Ethan replied. "There is only the choice that is honest." She exhaled, something loosening in her chest. Honesty. That was the word she had been circling without naming. The next day, Clara received a message from someone she had not heard from in years. A reminder of a life she had escaped, one that still expected her silence. She stared at the screen, feeling the old reflex stir. Run. Disappear. Do not engage. Instead, she set the phone down. She did not respond. She did not panic. When Ethan came home, she told him what had happened. He listened without interrupting. "I did not know what to say," she admitted. "You did not owe them an answer," he said gently. That night, Clara realized something fundamental had shifted. Staying was no longer about him. Leaving was no longer about escape. The decision ahead was about alignment, about choosing a life that did not require constant defense. The contract sat untouched on the table where it had been placed days ago. Its expiration date approached with quiet certainty. Clara looked at it without dread. She felt capable now, capable of choosing without bargaining with fear, capable of staying without surrendering herself, capable of leaving without erasing what had healed her. Ethan stood beside her, not touching the document, not touching her, giving space where space was needed. As the night deepened, Clara understood that the approaching end was not a threat. It was an invitation to choose not from survival, but from wholeness. And for the first time, she believed she was ready to answer it. The shift did not come with an argument. There was no raised voice, no confrontation, no dramatic ultimatum. It arrived quietly, the way truth often does when it can no longer be delayed. Ethan made the decision on a morning that looked like any other. The light filtered through the windows, pale and steady. Clara was reading at the table, her feet tucked beneath the chair, her posture relaxed in a way it had not been weeks earlier. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking about the contract," he said. Her hand stilled, but she did not look up. "So have I," she replied. Ethan did not sit. He remained standing, deliberately keeping distance, as if to ensure his words did not corner her. "I want to be clear," he continued. "If the contract ends and you choose to leave, I will not ask you to explain. I will not ask you to stay longer. I will not ask you to reconsider." Clara finally met his eyes. "And if I choose to stay?" she asked. "Then it will not be because of the contract," he said. "It will be because you want to." Something tightened her chest. Not fear, recognition. This was the moment she had been unconsciously preparing for. Ethan reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table, pushing it toward her without touching her hand. "What is that?" she asked. "The formal termination paperwork," he answered. "Pre-signed. Effective immediately, if you want it to be." The words settled between them, heavy and precise. He had removed the safety net she had been leaning against, but he had also removed the cage. Clara picked up the envelope, her fingers tracing the edge. She did not open it. "You are giving up control," she said quietly. "Yes," Ethan replied, "because control is no longer appropriate." She searched his face, expecting hesitation. There was none, only resolve. Later that afternoon, Clara walked alone through the city. The noise felt different now, less intrusive, less threatening. She passed couples arguing, strangers rushing, reflections of lives still locked in urgency. For the first time, she did not feel behind. She felt present. The question was no longer whether Ethan was safe. The question was whether she was ready to choose safety without obligation. She returned home as dusk approached. Ethan was not there. He had left deliberately, giving her space to think without his presence influencing the answer. On the table, the envelope waited. Clara sat across from it for a long time. She imagined leaving. A clean break. A life defined solely by her own decisions. No contracts. No expectations. She also imagined staying. Not as a role. Not as a debt. But as a continuation of something gentle, something honest. Neither vision felt wrong. That realization surprised her. When Ethan returned later that evening, the envelope was still unopened. Clara stood by the window, the city lights reflecting faintly against the glass. "I am not ready to answer yet," she said without turning around. Ethan nodded. "That is enough." She turned to face him. "Thank you for not rushing me," she added. "Thank you for trusting me with the truth," he replied. They stood there, not touching, not closing the distance. The tension between them was not desire. It was anticipation, the kind that comes before a life-changing choice. As night settled in, Clara understood something profound. The contract had been the beginning of her healing. But it would not be the reason she stayed, and it would not be the reason she left. The answer was coming, not from fear, not from gratitude, but from clarity. The night Clara finally slept was not the night she decided. It was the night she stopped running from the question. She woke before dawn, the city still quiet, the air cool against the window. For the first time in years, there was no tightness in her chest, no immediate need to brace herself against the day. She sat up slowly and listened. No footsteps, no voices, no expectations waiting outside the door. Ethan had kept his word. He had not hovered. He had not checked and disguised his concern. He had given her something she had rarely been offered before. Space without abandonment. Later that morning, Clara walked to the small park 2 blocks away. The one she had passed many times but never entered. Children were not yet there. The benches were empty. The trees stood bare, honest in their winter stillness. She sat down and allowed memories to surface. The life she had before contracts, before obligations disguised as protection, before learning that silence could be safer than protest. She remembered how quickly choice had been taken from her once before, how a single decision made under pressure had reshaped everything that followed. That was the wound she had been circling, not the marriage, not Ethan, The fear of choosing wrong again. Back at the apartment, Ethan was already awake, reading quietly at the table. He looked up when she entered, but he did not ask where she had been. He waited. Clara poured herself coffee, her movements steady. "I know what scares me," she said finally. Ethan closed the book, but kept his hands on it, grounding himself. "I'm listening," he replied. "I am afraid that if I choose to stay," she continued, "I will not know whether I am choosing from healing or from habit. I am afraid I will confuse safety with avoidance." Ethan nodded once. "That is a reasonable fear. And if I leave," she added, "I am afraid I will turn independence into isolation." He did not interrupt. "That fear is also reasonable." Silence followed. Not heavy, not awkward. Just honest. Clara met his eyes. "You have never asked me to stay," she said. "Not once." "That was intentional," Ethan replied. "I did not want your decision to be shaped by my need." She studied his face, searching for regret. There was none. Only patience. That afternoon, Clara found the envelope again. She finally opened it. The paperwork was clear, precise, respectful. No hidden clauses. No deadlines disguised as flexibility. She felt something release inside her. This was not a trap. This was an exit with dignity. She folded the papers carefully and placed them back inside. When evening came, Ethan stood by the window, the city lights reflecting faintly against the glass. "I will be traveling tomorrow," he said. 2 days. She turned to him. "Is that because of me?" she asked. "No," he answered. "It is because I trust you to decide without me present." Her throat tightened. That night, they shared dinner without pretense. Not as a married couple, not as strangers. As two people acknowledging that something meaningful had grown between them, regardless of the outcome. Before going to bed, Clara stopped him. "I need you to know something," she said. "Yes." "No matter what I decide," she continued, "this has already changed me." Ethan held her gaze. "That means it mattered," he said. When he left the next morning, the apartment felt different. Not empty. Open. Clara stood alone with the envelope in her hands, understanding that the choice was no longer about leaving or staying. It was about whether she could choose herself and still allow connection. The answer was close now, closer than it had ever been. The apartment was quiet in a way Clara had never known before. Not the silence that followed conflict. Not the silence that demanded endurance. This was a silence that waited. She stood by the window long after Ethan left, watching the city return to its rhythm. Cars moved. Lights shifted. People continued choosing their days without knowing how heavy a single decision could feel. The envelope rested on the table. Not threatening. Not urgent. Simply present. Clara picked it up and walked through the apartment slowly, touching familiar surfaces as if committing them to memory. The chair where she had first sat in guarded stillness. The counter where she had learned that kindness could exist without expectation. The doorway where she had watched a man leave without asking her to follow. She realized something then. This place had never been a cage. It had been a pause. She sat down and finally allowed herself to imagine both paths honestly. If she left, she would not be running. She would be stepping forward with clarity. She would take with her the knowledge that safety could be mutual, not transactional. If she stayed, it would not be because she was protected. It would be because she was choosing connection without surrendering herself. That was the difference. The phone buzzed softly. A message from Ethan. "I arrived safely. No response needed." She read it twice. There was no hidden meaning. No invitation disguised as courtesy. Just respect. Later that afternoon, Clara walked back to the park. This time, children were there. Their voices carried easily through the cold air. Parents watched from benches, present but not controlling. She observed them quietly, feeling something shift. Healing, she realized, did not erase fear. It taught you how to hold it without letting it decide for you. She returned home as evening approached, the city glowing in warm tones. She lit a single lamp and sat at the table. The envelope waited. Clara opened it again, not to read the terms, but to acknowledge what it represented. Choice without punishment. She took a blank sheet of paper and wrote slowly. Not a decision, a truth. When Ethan returned 2 days later, The apartment felt different to him immediately. Not colder, not warmer, clearer. Clara was waiting, seated at the table. The envelope lay between them. He did not reach for it. He did not ask. She met his eyes, steady. "I am ready to decide," she said. Ethan nodded once. "Whatever you choose," he replied, "it will be honored." She slid the paper toward him first. "I need you to read this before anything else." He unfolded it carefully. The words were simple. "I'm not afraid anymore." He looked up, his expression unreadable, but something in his posture softened. "I'm not choosing from fear," she continued. "That matters to me more than the outcome." Ethan took a slow breath. "That matters to me as well." She placed her hand on the envelope, but did not open it yet. "I am not answering whether I stay or leave tonight," she said. He did not react. "I am answering who I am now," she continued. "And I need you to know that whoever I choose to walk with, it will be as myself. Not as a contract, not as a role." Ethan held her gaze. "That is the only version of you I would ever accept." The moment stretched. Not tense. Sacred. Clara felt no rush. No pressure. Just the quiet certainty that the choice was hers and would remain hers, even after it was spoken. She slid the envelope slightly closer to herself. The answer was there now. Not written yet, but ready. She did not wake with certainty. It arrived slowly, settling as the morning did. Morning arrived quietly. No dramatic light through the windows. No moment demanding an answer. Just the soft certainty of a new day. Clara woke before the city did. She stood by the window, watching the early sky pale into blue, feeling steady in a way she had never felt before. The decision no longer pressed against her chest. It rested within her. When Ethan entered the kitchen, she was already there, dressed simply, her hair loosely tied back. She looked like someone at ease with herself. He paused when he saw her, not because he expected anything, because he sensed that something had settled. They sat across from each other without speaking for a moment. The envelope lay unopened between them. Clara slid it aside. "I'm not going to open that," she said calmly. Ethan nodded. She continued, her voice even. "The contract gave me safety when I needed it, but I do not need it anymore." He listened, hands relaxed, posture open. "I'm choosing to stay," she said. "Not because I have nowhere else to go. Not because I am protected here, but because I want to be." The words did not rush out. They landed. Ethan took a breath, slow and measured. "Then you stay," he said, "without terms." She met his eyes, and without obligation. "Yes," he replied, "without obligation." There was no celebration, no imbras, just understanding. Later that day, they walked through the city together, not as husband and wife, not as contract partners, simply as two people moving at the same pace. They stopped for coffee. She chose the place. He followed. They sat by the window, watching people pass. Clara realized she was not scanning for exits anymore. She was present. When they returned to the apartment, Ethan did something small that mattered more than any promise. He handed her a key. "Only if you want it," he said, "and only for as long as it feels right." She held it, then placed it on the counter. "I will take it," she said, "but I want us to decide what comes next together." Slowly. He smiled, not wide, not triumphant, relieved. That evening, Clara stood alone in the living room, the city lights reflecting softly against the glass. She thought about the woman she had been when she arrived there. Guarded, silent, enduring. She was still quiet now, but not silent. Ethan joined her by the window, standing beside her, not touching. She leaned closer on her own. "This is new for me," she said, choosing without fear. He nodded. "It is new for me as well," he admitted, letting go of control. They stood there, not defining the future, allowing it. Days passed. The apartment changed in small ways. Clara rearranged the space. Ethan noticed but did not comment. He learned her rhythms. She learned his. Trust did not arrive all at once. It grew. One evening, Clara found the envelope again. She picked it up and handed it to Ethan. "You can discard it," she said, "or keep it as proof that something temporary can still matter." He took it, then placed it into a drawer. "Some things are meant to end," he said, "so something else can begin." She smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was honest. The contract had brought them together. Healing allowed them to remain, not as roles, not as obligations, but as two people who chose each other freely, quietly, and without fear. And for the first time, that was enough.